So today I'm going to be talking to you about our paper. Oh. Sorry, that's a trick. Entitled Ethnicity, Trust and Cooperation with Police. My co-authors are Tina, who's spoken already today, and Adrian, who is not here. There's going to be a slight overlap between what I'm talking about and what Tina is talking about, but I'm just going to recap some of the key things that are important to my presentation and my findings, or our findings. So in this paper we focus on how police can encourage trust in police and cooperation with police from the public. So research suggests that in order for police to do their job well, it's really important that they are viewed as trustworthy by the ordinary person. So when people trust the police, they're more likely to cooperate with the police, so they're more likely to call the police to report crime and also to cooperate with the police more broadly. So as such, policing scholars have asked, what is it about police and policing that can actually promote trust in police and cooperation with the police? The resulting body of research finds that both police performance or police effectiveness in solving crime and so on, as well as procedural justice, which Tina has talked a little bit about, both predict trust in police. So people are more likely to trust the police when they believe that police are effective in preventing and controlling crime and disorder, as well as treating people fairly and demonstrating fairness in the decisions that they make. In turn, trust in the police is the key predictor of cooperation with the police. So in sum, procedural justice and police performance shape perceptions of trust in the police, and trust in the police is the key antecedent of cooperation with police. However, the effects of procedural justice and police performance are not found to be equal. So research indicates that procedural justice is actually the primary driver of trust in the police. And this procedural justice model has become the dominant model that's therefore used to explain trust in police and cooperation with the police. This model suggests that the principal antecedent of trust in police is procedural justice. And this procedural justice model is supported by general population surveys conducted in Western countries, including Australia, the UK and the US. That is not how I drew up my slides, but anyway. So as I was saying, there's been a lot of research using general population surveys. However, this kind of ignores the unique context of ethnic or cultural minority groups. Understanding trust in the police and cooperation with police among ethnic minority groups is important, as Tina's mentioned, because research finds that ethnic minority groups are actually less likely to trust the police. So for example, research in Australia, in the UK and in the US suggests that some ethnic minority groups believe that they're actually subject to over-policing, mistreatment at the hands of the police, racial stereotyping and bias. Considering that this is the perception, it's important to understand how police can actually build trust specifically with these groups. General population research suggests, as I was saying, that procedural justice is the key to building trust and cooperation with the police. However, recent research in Australia suggests that procedural justice may actually be less effective in promoting cooperation with police among ethnic groups compared to the general population. And this aligns with other research in different cultural contexts that indicates that police performance may actually be the important driver for cooperation with police among different groups. So the purpose of the current paper was to examine the applicability of this process-based model of trust in police and cooperation with police across specific ethnic groups. So we ask, can trust in police and cooperation with the police be built among ethnic groups using these same mechanisms that we know are important among general populations? So to examine these research questions, we employed cross-sectional data collected in the Australian Community Capacity Study survey, and we were using wave 3 of the survey. The ACS-CCS survey, or the ACS survey, is a large-scale survey of residents living in 298 randomly selected suburbs in and around the cities of Brisbane and Melbourne. The ACCS is funded by ARC CEPS and ARC Discovery grants at a cost of over $700,000. And I think it's one of the biggest, or the biggest survey investment that CEPS has actually made. The Wave 3 survey features a general population sample of 9,240 residents, as well as a sample of people from different ethnic backgrounds. So Tina talked about this before, and in this paper we're specifically focusing on 606 people from Indian and Vietnamese backgrounds. Random sampling methods were used to select the participants, and the cooperation rate for the general population sample was 68.3%, and for the ethnic sample, 41.5%. To conduct our analyses, the ACCS participants were allocated to 3 subsamples. So we looked at the general population sample and we compared them to the Indian subsample and the Vietnamese subsample. And we used ordinary least squares regression analyses to examine the relationship between our independent and dependent variables. So our dependent variables, our outcome variables, were trust in police and cooperation with the police. And our independent variables were procedural justice and police effectiveness, and we also controlled for demographic characteristics as well as prior contact with the police. So what we were testing was whether, as I say, the procedural justice model holds across these different subsamples. And as I've mentioned, this is the dominant model that's found in prior research. So this is that procedural justice is more important to trust in police and cooperation than is police performance. Okay, so turning to our results. We found that procedural justice was the key variable associated with trust in police in the general population sample. So while both procedural justice and police performance were related to trust in police, procedural justice, as you can see, was the stronger relationship. And this is consistent with the findings of prior research among general population samples in Western countries. In contrast, we actually found the opposite pattern for the Indian and Vietnamese subsamples. So as you can see, while both procedural justice and police performance were significantly associated with trust in the police, police performance was actually a stronger predictor of trust in police for the Indian subsample and also for the Vietnamese subsample. However, the differences between the coefficients for the Vietnamese subsample were more striking, so performance appeared to be much more important compared to procedural justice for trust in police. However, it's important to note, as was emphasised in Tina's paper, that procedural justice is still important for trust in police, so this is consistent with her findings. So turning to cooperation with police, when cooperation with police is the dependent variable in the analyses, the results are once again as expected for the general population sample. So we find that of the variables that are entered in the model, trust in police is the key predictor of cooperation with police. And as I said before, procedural justice was the key predictor of trust in the police. And these results are similar to those found in other Australian research that looks at this topic by my co-authors Tina and Adrian. So for the general population sample, this process-based model appears to hold. Procedural justice is the key antecedent of trust in police, and trust in police is the key antecedent of cooperation. However, for the Indian and Vietnamese subsamples, the story is once again different. So we found that police performance was more strongly associated with trust in police compared to procedural justice. And this theme is continued when we're actually looking at cooperation with the police as the outcome. So here we find that for the Indian subsample, police performance is the only significant predictor of their willingness to cooperate with the police. So this is suggesting that for the Indian subsample, police performance is the most important factor that drives whether or not they're willing to cooperate with the police. And you can see that this pattern is again repeated in the Vietnamese subsample. So why doesn't the procedural justice-based model translate for these ethnic groups? Why is police performance more important than fair treatment when we're looking at cooperation with police? Well, we suggest that there are a number of cultural explanations that may help to explain these findings, and I'll discuss these briefly. First is the theory of dual compulsion. So in some countries or cultures, there's an expectation that the police can gain cooperation and compliance through the use of force. And for this reason, people from these cultural backgrounds may value police performance over interpersonal treatment. So when considering cooperating with the police, they might not expect fair treatment, therefore it might be less important for them when thinking about cooperating with the police. Second and similarly is power distance theory. This theory suggests that certain groups will experience a large distance between authorities and the ordinary person. So in high power distance cultures, they expect an unequal distribution of power in society, therefore they might not expect fair or procedurally just treatment. Interpersonal treatment is therefore less important in these types of contexts. Lastly, we propose that the perceived risk of crime may play a role. So we know from prior research and through the media that people from Vietnamese and Indian cultural backgrounds in Australia may perceive a higher risk of victimisation compared to the general population. So for example, we know, and Sharon Pickering was talking about this morning, that in 2009 there was this tremendous amount of media attention focused on the violent attacks on Indian students in Melbourne and in Sydney. So the idea here is that when particular groups feel that they're disproportionately victimised, these groups may place greater weight on police performance in controlling and preventing crime when considering whether or not they'd be willing to cooperate with the police. And more research is needed to explore the efficacy of these theoretical explanations. So, in summary, we suggest that prior theory and research has emphasised the key role of procedural justice. We don't argue that procedural justice is now irrelevant or unimportant. In fact, procedural justice is the key predictor of trust in police for each of the subsamples that we considered. However, our findings highlight, or is a key predictor, I should say. However, our findings highlight the significant impact that police can have simply by communicating their effectiveness or their performance. Prior studies that focus on procedural justice and cooperation with the police sort of de-emphasise the importance of police communicating their performance and effectiveness to communities. We find that police effectiveness is very important for the willingness to cooperate with the police, particularly for the Indian and Vietnamese people surveyed in our study. For example, when police are viewed as performing well, calling the police to report crime might be viewed as a more productive exercise. So to conclude, we suggest that these findings highlight the merit of police communicating their successful outcomes to communities in addition to demonstrating fair procedures. Our findings also emphasise the shortfalls of a one-size-fits-all approach to policing. So that is, different groups within the community have different expectations and requirements of the police services. And I suggest that Australian police are already addressing this issue. So in Brisbane and Melbourne, the focus of this paper, current mechanisms which fit the bill include the Cultural Advisory Unit and Police Liaison Officers at the QPS, and the Police Community Consultative Committees and the Multicultural Advisory Unit at VicPol. So we suggest that by employing services to address the specific needs of cultural and ethnic groups, Australian police are best positioned to promote trust and cooperation. That's it, thank you.